Aim for the rear.
The load is on the front of the drone. We're at 62. We're parallel to him. We have the same speed. We're 100 feet above him. I have access to the wind. I'm ready for the opening.
In 2024, a number of attacks took place, notably in the Red Sea, which marked a real disinhibition of violence with Houthi attacks against the merchant navy. This has considerably changed the way the Navy prepares for its operations, so as to deal with all these threats.
Clearly, in recent years, the balance of power on the seas and oceans has hardened. The scale and violence of these actions have not been seen for several decades.
In fact, Western hegemony is being called into question in all theaters, and we're seeing its effects in the maritime zone.
We're seeing a paradigm shift in navies. Just as we have seen the return of tank warfare, just as we have almost seen the return of air combat, we now find ourselves in the renewed hypothesis of maritime combat.
At a time when interference and destabilization operations are multiplying all over the world, the arms race between the major international powers is back. For several months now, signals have been appearing on the high seas, calling for the utmost vigilance. From the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean, from the Red Sea to the Indo-Pacific, the return of war at sea is now a major concern. On the Atlantic seaboard, frictions are being played out below the surface.
Submarine warfare is a real issue for us. Firstly, because we have several maritime facades and we need to protect them. Secondly, because we are a nuclear-armed country. Off the coast of Brest, we keep a very close eye. They're all Russians in transit. In other words, we're not leaving any doors open for them.
Along with other NATO countries, we operate in this zone to know and understand the maneuvering of the Russians. We operate our nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines from Brest in the Atlantic. Deterrence is the French Navy's primary mission. It enables us to protect our country's vital interests. It is absolutely fundamental and draws on all the Navy's crews.
These submarines, of which there are many, also provide strategic signals. The strength of a submarine lies in its dilution and reappearance, and in showing that you can project a force, whatever it may be, quite far from your own shores. The Russians have understood this, and it's not necessarily going to attack our coasts or an Atlantic Alliance foothold, for example, but it shows that they're there, and that while you have articles explaining that on the land front, the Russians aren't advancing that much, meanwhile, whether in the Atlantic or in other areas of the world, the Russian Navy is making progress.
All this, in fact, involves all the allies, of course, and in this world the French Navy is a quality ally and an increasingly rare one, because in fact very few allies still have the military capabilities, but also the budget to continue to maintain a navy that can occupy the waters as the French Navy can.
It's right up our alley.
Yeah.
The commander's priority becomes anti-submarine warfare. The commander is located in the central operations, health posture, combat.
A submarine, when you don't know where it is a latent threat. So I need to know where it is. Uncertainty is the sinews of war. But it's also what we're constantly trying to overcome. And our job in anti-submarine warfare is precisely to remove this uncertainty. So tracking the submarine, or tracking it to be more precise, is our job. It means making sure that there are no latent threats. Anti-submarine warfare isn't an end in itself, it's just a means to allow freedom of action behind it.
It's good.
Because the submarine is really a privileged means of preventing a competitor's freedom of action. You want to prevent a nation from acting freely at sea, you put a submarine in front of one of its ports, and you practically prevent it from intervening, from leaving its ports. Ports, hence the importance of anti-submarine warfare, and this is particularly well understood in France. Anti-submarine warfare uses all the means at our disposal. It uses surface resources, surface vessels, i.e. frigates, avisos, airborne resources, helicopters, maritime patrol aircraft, but also submarines. In some cases, it can also use human or image intelligence resources. We're going to deploy the full range of capabilities a nation can have for anti-submarine warfare. But in the ocean environment, in water, and particularly in seawater, sound does not propagate continuously. It travels in curves, creating zones where it cannot be detected. Those who know their environment well is able to exploit these zones either to fill in the gaps left by non-detection or to hide in them.
Authorization to open sonar door.
Opening, okay, got it. Opening.
If you go into an area where you've never been before and you detect something, at first you might think, okay, I've got a submarine, but no, it might just be a bottom echo, a rock, a container, a wreck I didn't know about. If I've been there a few times and every time I go by I make the same detection, I'll be able to say, no, this is something normal.
Our detection capabilities have really exploded. And then, the way of interpreting this detection is also different. With the cross-referencing of the different sonars we can have, we can clear up a lot of things we couldn't before. Do you have anything in the 82 to quarantine? Or 82? That's what's a bit wearing. It's a lot of days of waiting. Well, we're not going to get it on the first try, obviously. Or it might happen, but it's very, very rare. Lots of briefings, lots of tactics to be prepared.
Yeah, it's Madame Mussolino. It's not what
Once we've got it,
it's something else.
a complete change of mentality, in fact. Already, the whole boat is concerned. You can feel it. There's going to be a kind of silence in the boat, in fact. We're going to get into an acoustic situation that's, shall we say, calm. We won't be making any noise. Broadcasting will no longer be done, for example, to transmit as little as possible. Or everyone's involved, everyone's in it, and it's like being in a tunnel. We're on top of it, 24/24, and it's a hunt. It's hours, yes, hours. Sometimes there's nothing. Sometimes there's nothing for days and days. But you must never give up, because all it takes is one time, one wrong tilt, one submarine. Paf! It's pinged. No matter how good it is, for 5 days you can lose it. You can't let go. After 5 days you can take it back.
The advantage of having these resources at work at the same time is that they complement each other. The resources, the Navy's NHXX helicopter, its main mission, is in support of the Strategic Oceanic Force, so it's involved in anti-submarine warfare missions. The FREM, for example, with its sensors, in particular its sonar, is capable of seeing a long way, but with a great deal of confidence.
See far, but has relatively low confidence in what it detects.
detects. It prefers distance to the relevance of contact. The advantage of the NH-90 is that, like all airborne vehicles, it has elongation. It is much faster than a FREM to investigate a contact. Our sonar, on the other hand, enables us to be quite discriminating in determining whether or not the contact we're holding is a submarine contact. It's a cat and mouse game. That's why the Cayman is so formidable, because once he's made contact, what we call us making contact, it's very difficult for the submarine to steal or break contact with the NH-90's sonar.
Where you need a lot of frigates to control a maritime area, because you can see where the frigate is, and when it's in one place, it can't be in another. A submarine, if it's in one place, you don't know it, so potentially it could be at the other end of your maritime area, and so it controls a lot more space.
The Suffren nuclear attack submarine is a new class of submarine. It differs from the previous type of submarine in many ways. In fact, it does the same missions as the old type of submarine, apart from a few new ones, but it does them much better. It does them much better because it has better sensors. It sees much further, whether in terms of acoustics, sonar, or optronic sensors above the water. It's also much, much more discreet. It's a vessel that can get much closer to some other boats without being spotted.
28 meters, 27 meters, 26 meters, 25 meters.
See there? It felt really pretty hard, but that's good. It felt good. Is it good?
The game becomes a plate. 18 meters, 3.
A nuclear attack submarine is primarily geared to a single mission, underwater combat at sea against surface vessels or submarines. Above all, we're able to penetrate groups of ships to find and track them, or to get as close as possible to a submarine to track and report it.
On contact in the 234 at 8,500 meters, uncertainty 2,400 meters, expansion speed 6 knots. Does it come out of the bio?
Is it okay?
Let's go
sure
for the
thing.
first knot, Commander. It's perfect.
I'm here to...
We'll be held up at 8,000 meters.
It's a bit like looking for a church in a haystack. We spent 2 hours scanning our sonars. It's really a very meticulous job. We're going to analyze every trace that we can observe that comes out on the sonars until we find the right one, which will eventually end out of nowhere. And it's because we have extremely attentive watchmen, because we have an analyst who's able to characterize it, that we'll finally detect the right one and then get on with the execution.
To the French press in the southwest and coastal sectors.
Well, my first tool is my ears. So I'll do a first filter, and then I have various analysis tools that will enable me to bring out information, frequencies, and things like that. This is a moment when you really have to stay focused. Try to analyze all the traces and classify them so as not to miss this smartwatch.
Okay, so for the fellow COTAC caller, the objective of the maneuver is to come in fast and lightning fast so as to be able to engage before entering his weapons range. It's a nest.
Underwater research is a long-standing skill in the French Navy. It's a truly cutting-edge skill in France, and one that is the envy of many other navies. For several reasons, we are fortunate to have ships that are extremely discreet. Secondly, our tactical know-how is very, very important and goes back a long way, since we've been operating nuclear submarines since the French Navy. And because we have nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines, we have nuclear attack submarines, like ours, to back them up. What do you need? You need to be in a position to engage. You said that was your goal. Have you touched broadband? No, it's more of a mission. The more submarines there are in the seas, the more potential threats there are in the different zones where these submarines are. In fact, that's the nature of our mission. We pose a threat in the zone we're in, a very big threat, because with our nuclear propulsion we can go very far, very fast.
Okay, they were having fun, guys. It's a nest. Last time we had this. Yeah, it's hot too.
We've got major competitors who are updating their submarine fleets with very high-performance submarines, so we have to be constantly ready to fight under the sea, and that's what we do every day. Quite simply, The sea is a very hostile environment. Being under the sea is very hostile. All these factors mean that we're constantly on our toes. Our teams don't question whether or not we're ready to attack another unit tomorrow. In fact, we're always training. As soon as we do an exercise, the exercise is to go and sink a boat or go and sink a submarine. There are no half measures. And so we're always ready for this higher state of risk we're talking about today.
Historically, because the sea is flat, because the sea has no obstacles, and because the sea is a fluid medium, the sea has been shared throughout history. The sea has become territorialized around the coasts for obvious reasons of protection, and some people in certain places tend to want to appropriate and exploit it as they see fit. The high seas are de facto the scene of confrontation in a space where freedom once reigned, but where some are seeking to hinder it. The point of deploying a force like the Naval Air Group is to send a strong but not... that France is committed to freedom of navigation in these common spaces.
A naval air group provides the capacity to hold a large maritime area. On the one hand, these aircraft, with their ability to strike either on land or at sea, enable us to cover a large area with a high degree of responsiveness. Then there are the frigates, which can move closer or wider, depending on the situation. These large volumes close off accesses. We can imagine closing an access between Norway and Iceland, for example, and then creating a block, and prevent Russian maritime patrol aircraft from getting through. It's a very strong political signal because there's mass, there's visibility.
Thanks to its mobility, we could end up one day be an air base in the north of the Rouse Sea, and a fortnight later have the same air base producing the same effects off the coast of France.
Visit. A title's produced by the Amara Ore community.
In fact, the French Naval Air Group played an important role at the start of the war in 2082 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It played a strategic presence and signaling role in the Mediterranean as the Russians swarmed the sea and tried to dominate it. And so, obviously, during the escalation that took place after the terrorist attacks of October 7th and the Israeli response in Gaza, French naval assets were deployed in the Mediterranean and played an equally important role that was noticed. And today there's been a shift. The Naval Air Group is in the Indo-Pacific zone. It's an interesting time for the Naval Air Group to be in this zone, given the importance of what's at stake and the competition between China and the United States. It's a way of reminding our partners in the region, our Asian partners, that France can play a role without exaggerating French capabilities. I don't think anyone in the French Navy claims to have the same capabilities as the US Navy or even the Chinese Navy, but that doesn't mean France doesn't have a role to play. So it's important for the Naval Air Group to be there and send out this strategic signal, which is well received by our partners.
The aim is to move up the range quickly so that we're ready for the Red Sea, for the CO to take full account of the tools we discussed yesterday with the COMGAY so that communications run smoothly.
The slightly special and new points is that we are increasingly taking into account the drone threat, which is a relatively recent development in recent years, and for which we are adapting all GAN resources, including the embarked air group, to be able to respond to this threat. around the Naval Air Group, but also to be able to respond at long range from the aircraft carrier. In a way, this is the principle behind the embarked air group, which is there to act at a distance. Rayon action is the primary raison d'etre of the airborne group. I can very easily send my airburst 1,000 kilometers from the aircraft carrier to carry out missions. I can easily double that with longer range weapons, with in-flight refueling capabilities specific to the airborne group. And add to that, you have an aircraft carrier that moves 1,000 kilometers a day. It's clear that there's a very strong capacity to act.
India, and we're everywhere.
Go down to the rear. Pursuit, it's advancement. Descend not from high. Copy.
The aircraft carrier is sailing in a threat zone of surface drones, aerial drones, and missiles.
All hands on deck, status report. We've been called back to battle stations. Air threat yellow, asymmetric threat yellow, fire on gold. We're in the middle of the Red Sea, 50 nautical miles from the coast. Missile threat, surface drone threat.
We're preparing our transit of the Red Sea, so the aim is to master the technical gestures needed to deal with a surface drone threat. A ballistic missile threat, an anti-ship threat, and an airborne drone threat. To fight at sea, you can't do it alone. Our capabilities don't add up, they multiply. But why? Because our sensors pull what they see. And so we increase our detection range by detecting each other and the exchange of information that circulates within the force. And then we use the most appropriate weapon to deal with the threat that comes to the force.
We're through Tribor now.
Zio, we can zoom in on the Zodiac.
This is the Zodiac program for training on the snow zone. 3,500 meters. Up commander for contact. Track classified hostile. Acknowledged. To all, runway and Tribor, 108, classified hostile. Danger symmetrical red, fire on order. Roger red, shoot on command. At 8,000 meters we start maneuvering. In Tribor.
So there's obviously the backbone, the spinal column, which is the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle with its embarked air group made up of Hawkeye aircraft, aerial gazers, as well as Marine Rafales and helicopters. And to escort the aircraft carrier, we have 3 frigates, each dedicated to a specific combat domain: anti-submarine warfare, anti-submarine, anti-aircraft, and anti-surface warfare. But these boats are surrounded by a nuclear attack submarine, which often acts as a precursor, giving us a form of early warning, like a form of upstream observation. Thanks to this escort around the aircraft carrier, we are able to provide a surveillance surface that we feel is fully capable of confronting any competing or undesirable elements and even certain threats.
Air defense frigates are highly armed, especially for long-range protection of the aircraft carrier. As they are in charge of anti-air warfare, we are in direct contact with the aircraft carrier so that we can trigger a takeoff on the alert of airbursts.
Unsuccessful. So we have a suspicious aircraft, starboard of the 35 at a distance of 22 nautical miles.
This bubble of protection allows the Naval Air Group to operate in complete freedom in all the world's seas, or with the guarantee that any threat approaching the carrier will be anticipated.
Is it any good? Is it okay? Are we clear? Are we clear? Are we clear? See?
Op D, it will be able to detect and act at about 150 kilometers around the laptop. What we're talking about here is electronic warfare. Identify the electromagnetic emissions of these mobiles and get an idea of what type of carrier they are. Then we can react. We can go as far as using fire control to show our truth, or use fighters to intercept. So we get them off the deck of the aircraft carrier and send them on intercept, first to confirm visual identification, and then to stand by and divert if possible. All this to avoid overflying the aircraft carrier, or ultimately engaging it, because we'd be putting our fighters on an engagement mission before they reach carrier level. It's that we have to move fast, because especially in anti-aircraft warfare, any second loss can be blamed on us later, or we can be awarded victory. So the aim is to react as quickly as possible, to do the job of defending the aircraft carrier.
We have to act effectively over time, and even if the aircraft carrier has nuclear capabilities, the planes need fuel, the escort boats need fuel. Capabilities like the new tanker are particularly valuable. With new dimensions, new flexibility, we gain in capacity for action, that's for sure. But we also essentially need partnerships and alliances to be able to work.
French maritime bases, whether in Djibouti or the United Arab Emirates, for example, also enable us to project our maritime power and presence. It helps us to better understand that all theaters are linked and that we need to have a strategy in place from the outset to be able to secure and defend French and therefore European room for maneuver. What's more, it obviously enables us to connect with France's overseas territories. Let's not forget that France has one of the world's most important exclusive economic zones and therefore one of the most important maritime zones in the world.
The force supply ship is the last nautical logistic to bring as close as possible to the forces everything they need to last at sea. This means fuel, ammunition, foodstuffs, also essential to last at sea, and then all kinds of products, spare parts, also workshop capabilities. It's the perfect response to the need for last nautical logistical support, possibly in a zone of operation, in a threat zone, under threat, that the force supply ship must meet.
We supply 2 boats at the same time, a fuel boat, the Charles de Gaulle, with fuel and food. It's quite special and involves a lot of people. It's quite restrictive because the size of the ship and its missions mean that we have fairly limited slots for refueling large quantities of fuel. On the order of 2,600, 1,500 cubic meters of fuel in a fairly short space of time. On this side, at the front, we have the aviation fuel, and at the back, we have the fret part. This can be food, ammunition, any product, any spare part. Take a route that allows us to move as little as possible. Then it's a fairly dangerous maneuver. We're transferring fuel at fairly high pressures with very heavy loads, over a ton, and with cables permanently taut. And lots of people milling around, so if you're not focused, things can quickly get out of hand and it's an accident. We have at least 5-6 hours between the start of the presentation and the whole of Nargate Island. Almost 5 hours.
What structured the boat was the support. Quite simply, When you look at the Jacques Chevalier, the bow is the fuel, the middle is the ammunition, and aft is food. The Jacques Chevalier was conceived and designed around this support structure with a flow logic that represents a real step forward from the previous generation. Everything is designed to be faster, more efficient and simpler. Carrying capacity has been doubled in all areas. The fact that we can carry and deliver 2 to 3 times more oil, ammunition and foodstuffs will increase our capacity to ensure the aircraft carrier's refueling cycle. It's going to be the Jacques Chevalier's challenge to bring it as close as possible to the aircraft carrier over distances that are multiplied.
It's the bomb bay in which we store all the bombs that go under the gusts. So we can support them with the onboard air group and then send them out to sea for refueling anywhere in the world. We have the capacity to last. We can also support the escorts of the naval air group. We can supply them with artillery ammunition so that the entire force can defend itself. Defense. This includes small caliber, large caliber, and then complex munitions such as missiles. Our second mission is to take part in the ship's self-defense. We're a supply ship capable of defending ourselves against asymmetric or missile threats. In terms of munitions, we're really capable of providing complete support for the Charles de Gaulle, its onboard air group, and all its escorts.
About the BRF, we often say, whatever, whenever, wherever. I'll bring you whatever you want, wherever you want, whenever you want. And in the where you want, that includes areas that may be under threat. So the contract for a force-fed supply ship is to be able to transit under threat and to be able to bring these logistics to the aircraft carrier at the last nautical mile.
Naval special actions are a real asset for us today in this complex environment of power competition. We're not really at war, but we sense that there are very strong tensions between the different blocs. Violence is being expressed in what we call the gray zone, and it's in this gray zone that special forces really come into their own. Particularly at sea, this opens up a number of very interesting military options in the gray zone I've described. You have a group of men, and they'll bring back a particular lesson that will be of interest at the highest level. Or it will have an action in a geographical, military, political, or diplomatic field that will be particularly valuable.
The Jobber Commando is one of the only units in France capable of interacting in all 3 dimensions, land, air, and sea, which makes it unique within the Special Forces community. Special actions at sea are unique. On the one hand, because they take place at sea, a demanding zone, a demanding environment, which requires specific know-how, and on the other, because these naval special actions require us to be able to operate in synergy with all the French Navy's vectors and capabilities, so as to be able to carry out operations in an environment that is truly complementary, whether it's relocating a target with the French Navy's Atlantiques II, followed by surface vessels. We're going to provide the final touch to bring these missions to a successful conclusion, involving a wide range of capabilities within the French Navy. The aim is to provide added value, a military effect in depth in enemy zones, which will have a strong strategic effect for the benefit of policy. Hence the specificity of this pinprick operation, which will remain below a threshold of attributability, precisely in order to preserve the underlying intentions and thus multiply the leverage effects of this operation.
Here, we can imagine a context where we've carried out an initial nautical raid with our ERCs, the fast commando boats, on which we'll be able to take advantage of the load carrying capacity to cover a long sailing distance. And next, here to operate in a non-permissive maritime environment. To minimize the maritime footprint on the water, we're going to make a second load break with the ERC, the light commando craft. We are the only ones able to operate here in complete autonomy. From the projection phase through to the real action phase, with a small footprint, a very strong impact, and yet we will only have deployed a small number of personnel on the ground.
We have, with the mastery of our skills within this environment, the ability to act directly, anywhere, at any time, with multiple effects that we can propose, that we can adapt quite surgically to the mission that is asked of us, to the political effect that is sought to meet an extremely precise need.
It's incredible. Wait, I'll give you the next one.
We're here in Djibouti, an area where the Marine commandos have been present and the Fusiliers Marins have been present for 45 years. It's an ideal zone for operational preparation, whether in the desert or the maritime environment. It's also an extremely strategic zone, as I think we've been reminded in recent years. We're located at the tip of the Horn of Africa, at the entrance to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. It's a place of friction and competition and of major strategic interest. We're also pre-positioned in this zone, in a position to carry out any actions that may be requested of us in the service of our authorities. We have the advantage of 20 years operational experience, which has shaped and built us. In the end, we have a common technical and tactical base that is extremely robust. Extremely robust, with a well-structured system that enables us to constantly question ourselves, to be flexible and agile enough to evolve and adapt to the environment and our enemies. To the environment, to our enemies, to our adversaries, to our theaters of operation, and And in fact, I think this is one of our great strengths.
So it's out. I've got the gauges.
Ready to go, delayed. Ready. Delayed.
The great difficulty for a navy or a group of navies is that from now on you have to deal with or know how to deal with a number of overlapping crises. When you have a major maritime power filling its holds with new ships, what are you going to do if that navy attacks in the Indo-Pacific? At the same time, you've got these terrorist groups to deal with because a conflict in an extremely strategic zone is spilling over. You have to have the right navy for that. And at the same time, you have to deal with the day-to-day issues of narcops, narcotics, illegal fishing, and human trafficking. And that's extremely difficult. If you're on your own, it's just impossible.
Good? Is it good? Is it good?
We're currently involved in a Caribbean operation to combat drug trafficking. In the last rank, I signed Go Fast, which means fast vessels. These are fast vessels that travel at several dozen knots, often with large engines. We're going to try to intercept these boats with the support of a helicopter support, with onboard propeller gunners, to first give warning shots and then go on to shoot the engines to stop it. This is an operation that is well known to intelligence services in France and abroad, and we may have to make a special effort in terms of intelligence for these operations. Or we're also trying to work on opportunities, i.e. we're going to position ourselves in areas that are known, traditionally known, favorable to the presence of drug traffickers,
And so
positioning
it's positioned.
ourselves, targeting surveillance flights by maritime patrol aircraft and helicopters to be able to detect them, to maximize the chances of detecting and then intercepting drug traffickers.
In concrete terms, we've just launched the helicopter to go into the area and work out the tactical situation. We, Germinal, are going at maximum speed to position ourselves on the wings around this rendezvous point. The challenge is also to avoid being counter-detected, so it's a question of getting the runway, but not being seen, so we keep a safe distance from this rendezvous point. So we're going to pre-position ourselves with the Germinal, and once we're in the area, depending on what the Panther has reported to us, we'll set up an airfield. Panther, we'll put the tracos in the water with the Panther.
We're on the lookout for traffickers who travel on fast-moving vectors. There are many islands in the whole arc with territorial waters, and our action has to take place in international waters. We have to react as quickly as possible while these traffickers are circulating in open waters. In the search and relocation phase, we have 4 pairs of eyes constantly outside and a 5th pair both inside and outside. So the captain, the crew member, and the 2 draftsmen are focused outside only, and the co-pilot alternates between radar and visual search. Come on, we've got the V1, let's re-advance. The worse the sea conditions are going to be, given the small size of the boats.
the more complicated radar detection becomes. So at that point, the idea is to have an extra loss on the outside.
Nose to the right. Hold, hold, hold.
We often work at night, very low down, with an almost infinitesimal margin for pilot error, so the slightest mistake could land the helicopter. I have to see how I can reposition myself to offer a window to the halite shooters, while at the same time keeping a close eye on the helicopter. The first and most important thing to remember is to get the chopper and crew back on board.
Condos. The people we're going to apprehend at sea, we're not going to have the masterminds behind these markets. We'll have profiles from the lower end of the chain who are really used for transit. Nonetheless, apprehending these people enables the specialized boarding services to work on the networks and to be able to trace them as they go along. The armed forces seized over 40 tons of drugs in the year 2024 alone. The armed forces in the West Indies seized over 28 tons. A very concrete example for the Germinal is 8 tons. So these are fairly large volumes. What's certain is that they're on the rise. These are quite exhilarating missions for the sailor because the results are very concrete. In other words, we're looking for seizure, we're looking for interception, and when it works, the result is very concrete. So there's a real sense of satisfaction, pride in the work accomplished, and a sense of mission that's quite easy to achieve because it's a job that involves a lot of work. Because it's an everyday job, but one that the crew assimilates quite easily.
What is certain is that the fight against drug trafficking is a confrontation of wills. For us, this confrontation of wills translates into a logic of aggressiveness, a logic of combativeness. We're going to accept a level of exposure for our sailors that's perhaps a little higher than what we'd accept for more conventional missions.
The great difficulty of a navy is that it has to manage huge areas and at the same time, in a few small, highly strategic zones, groups, whether state-owned or not, with relatively few resources, can slip through the net. The same applies to trafficking. If we know that 40 tons of cocaine are seized in a single year in Martinique, we can only imagine the number of bins and bags of cocaine that may have passed through to the other side, to Antwerp or Le Havre. It's the same for human trafficking. So, yes, it's a tough job, but it's a job that needs to be done because, once again, seizure and rescue are becoming increasingly important.
I think we're living in a very special strategic moment, and in a way, it's no exaggeration to say that we haven't lived through one like it since the Second World War. Since the Second World War. Because in fact, there is a confluence of factors and destabilizing factors at the moment. Destabilizing factors at the moment. We're at the end of a cycle of a world order that was established at the end of the Second World War, which was dominated by the West, and which in fact underpinned the security and prosperity of Europeans. The security and prosperity of Europeans in particular, and it's a prosperity that we take at face value, and in fact that we shouldn't take at face value, because today it's really in danger and in trouble.
It's very difficult for a French person to imagine that when he goes to an online shopping site and is promised that the next day a product that looks like it's been mass-produced in China will arrive in his slat box. It's very difficult for him to imagine that, in fact, he's come by sea and not by private jet, despite what he's been promised, i.e. in less than 24 hours or even the same day. It comes from sea traffic, so it's not immediately obvious when there's a crisis. A huge cargo ship blocking the Suez Canal or a tool attack, but if there are no measures taken by major military and sovereign powers to maintain access to shipping, then we end up with total paralysis, particularly in Western countries, which depend heavily on this traffic.
So this new strategic era, in fact, calls for a review of the terms of the transatlantic alliance to preserve it. It calls for a revolution in the psychology of the population and a return to the concept of military sacrifice to maintain the security and prosperity of the country.
The Navy's primary mission is indeed the implementation of deterrence.
The Navy also protects France, the French people and their interests from the beach to the open sea. With the acceleration of today's crises, their multiplication and simultaneity, the one who wins is the one who adapts. Developments around the world show that power relations have become a way of resolving conflicts, that the choice of brute force, of violence, is regularly made to resolve crises, and so we must, and this is my responsibility as Chief of Naval Staff, prepare our forces for the future. Prepare our forces for this kind of scenario.